When most people think of deserts, they think of hot deserts, dry, rocky areas with lots of sand that have hardly any plants. But deserts can be hot or cold, and it turns out that the largest desert on our planet is not in Africa, it's in Antarctica. The thing that defines a desert, first and foremost, is the lack of water. And when there's very little water, plants and animals develop incredible adaptations to survive. Today, we're going to investigate some of the most hostile and challenging environments on planet Earth, the desert and polar climates.
I'm Math Dad.
I'm Science Mom.
Join us today to find out what happens in extreme climates.
Hello! Quick welcome to those who are watching live. Shout out to Aubrey and Jackie watching from Minnesota, to Ginevra from Missouri, to Mia Cohen and Abby in California, Kendall from Illinois, Cody from Alabama.
Welcome. What are we talking about today, Science Mom?
Today we're talking about extreme climates. And last time, you might remember, we talked about how a tropical plant can't survive if you take it somewhere where it snows. As soon as it experiences freezing temperatures, those cells are going to burst open and essentially the whole plant's just going to...
Wait, the cells themselves are breaking down?
They usually do, because tropical plants can't handle the water inside their cells freezing. And plants that live where there's snow, they have special adaptations so that when it freezes, their cells don't explode.
Well, that's
because
cool.
When water freezes, it expands, and if your cells expand and break, that's bad.
That does sound bad.
It's very bad. But the reverse is also true. If you take a plant that is adapted to live where there's winter and you put it in a tropical climate, sometimes it can't survive. Well, what if we visit the most extreme climates on Earth? What type of animals will we find there? Some pretty extreme ones.
Yeah, I mean, it would have to be adapted to survive that climate.
It does have to be adapted to survive in some extreme climates. So first, let's talk about what a desert is.
Deserts are extreme.
Deserts are extreme and they're arid. That means they do not have very much rain. And do you have a guess about how much rain an area needs to have in order for it to qualify as a desert? So this much amount or less. What would your threshold be for calling something a desert? If it gets, let's say it gets 2 feet of rain a year, is that a desert or not a desert? What if it only gets that much rain a year?
Okay, if it only gets that much, it's a desert. And if it gets 2 feet, it's probably not a desert, but somewhere in between.
Where's the line? Where's the line?
Okay. Is it like 2 inches?
2 inches is definitely a desert, but the cutoff that is usually agreed upon is 10 inches of rain. So around a foot. If you only get that much in an entire, in an entire year, then we call that a desert. But an even better term is arid. If an area is going to lose more water each year than it receives, we call that an arid area. And it turns out that almost a third of the land on Earth is arid. Let's pull up our map.
Oh, wow. A third is a lot.
A third is a lot. So here is a map of the world, and the red area indicates a hot desert region. A pink area is a cold desert region, and not pictured, but equally important, around all of those areas, we have semi-arid savannas and areas that sometimes can lose more water than they actually get.
Those are just the deserty-est of the desert. Now you said a cold desert, so is it like Antarctica is a cold desert?
Yes. Antarctica and the Arctic are both deserts.
But what's the pink thing like up in China?
The Gobi Desert. So the Gobi Desert is a cold desert, but it's not one that is always snowy. Antarctica and the Arctic, the polar regions, are actually deserts. They get less than 10 inches of rain or snow each year. And a lot of times they're losing more water than they're getting with precipitation. So they qualify with both definitions as deserts.
Cool.
Now, if you think of the animals and plants that live in a desert, you probably first think of a cactus, because a cactus is a plant that you only find in the deserts, and instead of leaves, it has spines. And those spines can be yellow or red or a variety of different colors. And the reason it has spines is to protect it so that other animals don't eat it.
Wait, what's that red thing?
The red one is a red barrel cactus. And the spines are quite red. That's how it got its name, red barrel cactus.
Those don't look that pokey.
They're very pokey, Math Dad.
Oh, okay.
They aren't quite as dangerous. If you accidentally touch them, it's not going to come off the cactus and stick in you like the cholla cactus will. This one right below me, you barely touch that one and you'll get a spine in your finger. But some cactuses have spines that are barely noticeable, like that little heart-shaped one.
Aww.
Look, it's a Valentine for you, Math Dad. Don't touch it.
A snuggly Valentine for me?
Not snuggly. If you touch it, you'll feel like your fingers have fiberglass in them. The spines are very small, but they make sure that animals don't eat it, because you do that once and you will regret it, and then you will not eat another one.
Yeah, that's a really effective deterrent, I'll tell you.
It is. And then one of the most famous cactuses is the saguaro cactus. Down right below in this picture, you can see how big they are. They're taller than a lot of trees.
Yeah, okay, that is impressive.
Now, cactuses are fun, and Math Dad, I'll tell you, I could talk about cactuses all day long because I love plants, but
she could.
I decided for this exploration into extreme climates, I'm going to present you with 3 fact or fiction statements that you have to try and guess. Are they true or not about different desert plants that are not cactuses? You ready?
I'm ready. I can do this.
First fact. The plant with the longest leaves in the world lives in a desert, and its leaves are more than 13 feet long.
Well, that was oddly specific, but all right, help me out here, chat. Plant with long leaves. Long leaves don't make sense in the desert because, it's good for photosynthesis because you get lots of surface area, but it's bad because you would lose lots of moisture. So desert plants should have small leaves, which means this is false. It's a trap.
And you should have listened to Finn in the chat, who said yes, because it is true that a plant with long leaves, 13 feet long, does live in the desert, but this is actually not the longest leaf in the world.
Wait, what?
So this one was kind of a trick one. It is almost true, but a little bit false.
Welwitschia?
Welwitschia is the name of this plant. This plant is so bizarre, Math Dad. You won't be able to believe it. So Welwitschia is a plant that sprouts, and once it sprouts, it makes 2 leaves, and those 2 leaves are the only leaves it will ever have in its entire life, but they never stop growing.
Oh, kind of like my hair. Oh,
your hair stopped growing a long time ago.
No, it's just biding its time.
But these leaves, when they start growing, you can see that they almost touch each other on the sides. As they keep growing, they're going to split. And when they split, they end up looking like this. It's still those same 2 leaves, but they've split into these ribbons. And the biggest Welwitschia plant is as big as a car. If you were standing next to this, you might barely be able to see over the top. That's how big this is.
Whoa. Okay, that's just 2 leaves? That split like that?
Yes, those 2 leaves split and they keep on growing and growing and growing. Now, I told you this one was a little tricky, and I can probably give you credit for no matter how you answered, because these leaves are incredibly long, but there are certain palm trees that don't live in the desert that have even longer leaves.
That's 1 leaf?
That is 1 leaf. So
that's what we call a branch.
It's actually not a branch, it's a leaf.
What?
The date palms and the raffia palms actually have leaves where a single leaf is up to 20 feet in length. And they need more water than Welwitschia does. Welwitschia, this plant, can go for a year with no rain and still stay alive, which is incredible.
How's that even possible?
It has a big taproot that goes down deep, and it's able to store water. When the rains do come, it will store a lot of extra water, and its leaves are very smart, and they don't leak water during the day. Most plants, they have these tiny little holes in them called stomata, and during the day, those are open, water goes out, and carbon dioxide comes in. Welwitschia closes them during the day and just opens them at night.
So is it photosynthesizing during the day?
It captures carbon dioxide at night and stores it, and then during the day, it does photosynthesis.
Oh, that's when energy production is actually happening. But doesn't lose water. Oh, man.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, well, it makes sense that it would have to do something so drastic, because otherwise it's just going to dry out.
Yeah, it lives in an extreme climate.
So fun fact for you guys watching, we bought a banana tree this last year and planted it in our yard.
It died.
Yeah, within like week or two, it kind of turned to mush.
We live in a desert climate that is very hot, and you can't plant a banana tree in the summertime.
But
we should have kept it indoors.
Yeah. Okay, and then one thing I've got to say before we move on here, we've got to pause and just say, Welwitschia is an awesome name for a plant.
It's named after the scientist who discovered it, who I believe was Dutch, and his last name was Welwitsch.
Well, it's like the perfect name for a mad scientist.
Dr. Welwitsch.
Welwitsch.
All right, next plant. So next fact is, and Matt said you weren't supposed to see that picture. Don't look.
Okay.
That's the wrong button.
We went back.
Oh, sorry. I wanted you to make this just the screen big.
Oh, I see what my job was.
That's all right. So the next cool fact is that the oldest plant in the world lives in the desert. The oldest plant. Single living organism. Because there are some clonal organisms where you have like a big aspen grove and you say that's the oldest living thing. We're not talking about an aspen grove, just a single plant. The oldest single plant lives in the desert. Okay.
I think I know the answer to this. I think I know. It's because it's this pine tree that lives up on these mountains. What do we call those?
A bristlecone pine?
Bristlecone pines are the oldest things on Earth. And they're like 6,000 years old.
Bristlecone pines are really old. I think the oldest one is about 6,000 years old, but it doesn't really live in a desert. It lives in a mountain area that gets a little bit more rain and snow each year.
Okay,
it gets about 10 inches.
So it's false then.
It's false. No, my statement's true because I said the oldest plant lives in the desert, and this is it. This is the creosote bush, and the oldest creosote bush is a creosote bush that has been named King Clone.
But that's not older than the tree, right?
It's older than the tree. It's estimated to be about 11,000 years old. So how could a bush like this get that old? And the answer is it forms a ring. So the original bush in the center, those branches eventually will die and new branches will come from the roots and come up and form a ring. And the older the plant gets, the bigger that ring becomes. This is not King Clone. This is a smaller ring-shaped creosote bush that was by it. King Clone was so big, I couldn't get it in one picture because it's almost 30 feet across.
That's pretty big. So in the center is where the original one was growing.
The original seedling sprouted in the center, and then as it gets older, it forms this ring that just keeps getting bigger and bigger.
Can you imagine that? Like start getting old, you're like, I've been using this arm a lot. I think I'll just grow a new one, and new arm, and then this original one dies off after a while.
That's essentially what this plant does, but it's actually a very smart strategy because the root system underneath is slowly crowding out other plants and getting more of an area. So then it's like claiming more of the desert ground.
Wonder if I lived 11,000 years if I could do that.
Nope.
No?
Nope. All right, fact number 3. In the Mojave Desert, there is a tree with edible flowers. So this is a tree that grows in a desert, a true desert where there's less than 10 inches of rain a year, and you can eat the flowers of this tree. Is that true or false?
It's a trick question because trees don't grow in the desert because deserts don't have enough water for trees to survive.
Well, there is a member of the yucca family that we actually call a tree. It is the Joshua tree. And the Joshua tree really does get to be tree size. Now, does this tree have growth rings like a bristlecone pine tree or a spruce tree where you can cut it down and look at the rings and see how old it is? No, this is more like a palm tree where there aren't any growth rings, but we still call it a tree because it has a hard woody trunk and the flowers are indeed edible.
Well, that's a picture of Science Mom.
Yes.
With our son on her shoulders.
I don't think I could have him on my shoulders anymore because he's taller than me now. This picture's a few years old, but I wanted to get a good picture of a flower and we couldn't find any that were close to the ground. So I said, here, stand on my shoulders. And then right after we did that, we found this other flower, which was much closer to the ground. And I have eaten them before. They taste a little bit like peas, like fresh garden peas, only more bitter. So peas crossed with cucumber, crossed with yuck. That's what this tastes like.
Wait, aren't they like protected, like you're not supposed to?
They are not an endangered or a threatened species. And we didn't take the whole entire flower. We just took one little tiny green part.
But isn't there concern that they might go extinct?
Yes. So these trees, they are really abundant in the Mojave Desert right now. And if you can see my son down there for scale, he looks really tiny compared to this big tree, but they only flower and sprout during wet springs And we have not had as many wet springs, and they are predicted that if the climate keeps warming, they're predicted to go extinct in the next, 40, 50 years.
Oh,
Hopefully that doesn't happen.
So you say they only grow in the Mojave Desert?
Only in the Mojave Desert.
Man.
Now, the Mojave Desert is dry, but it is not the driest desert in the United States. In the United States, we have Death Valley, and Death Valley is one of the driest locations in the United States. This is Badwater Basin, the lowest and hottest location in the US. And do you have any guesses as to what that is all down there? Any guesses?
I know what it is.
What is it?
It's salt, right?
It's
in the salt flat.
It is. This is all salt.
Okay, so my understanding is that over time, the rains will bring minerals and salt down from the mountains, and because that's the lowest point in the U.S., actually.
And then all the water evaporates.
Yeah, there's nowhere for it to escape. So kind of like where the Great Salt Lake gets all of its salt and doesn't flow out, so it just gets saltier and saltier over time.
Exactly. And this is the defining characteristic of deserts, is that there is less water coming in than there is water leaving. And all of that water leaving is what creates that big salt flat in the Badwater Basin. And that geometric design that you see around the salts, that's just caused by the way the water evaporates, which is really pretty amazing.
And that particular one's down below sea level.
It is. It's almost 200 feet below sea level.
It's kind of scary. If the mountains were removed, the water would come right in.
So we learned about 3 amazing plants that are adapted to living in the desert. And I want to touch on just a couple animals as well before we move to talking about polar regions. So here is a quick video for you. And I want to see if you can identify this bird.
Ooh.
What bird is this?
This is our back porch.
This bird came up right to our back porch and was standing on our welcome mat.
Mm.
And you can see
what's its throat doing?
He looks like he's panting. It was about 110 degrees Fahrenheit when this video was taken. Nate and Muhadisa have it. It's a Roadrunner. Arrow Skies has got it too. This is a Roadrunner. They are incredible birds, and they do run very fast. Their name is well deserved. And
Meep.
Meep is right. They can sprint up to 25 miles per hour, which is a bit faster than a person can go. And this little guy was probably hanging out on our back porch because it was so hot outside that our window by our patio, it probably felt a little bit cooler there because our house was air conditioned, and the air, I bet, felt a little cooler in that spot. But is a Roadrunner faster than a coyote? Because coyotes live in the desert too.
Probably not. Coyotes have got to be really fast.
Coyotes are definitely faster. A coyote can run up to 45 miles per hour. A Roadrunner only 25 miles per hour. But a Roadrunner can fly. So coyotes don't catch and eat Roadrunners very often at all because the Roadrunner can just fly up into a tree and get away.
Yeah. So I don't know if you guys have actually seen the cartoons of Wile E. Coyote versus the Roadrunner. So if you haven't seen those, you've missed out in your childhood. But I don't know if they even show those anymore.
I bet most people are familiar with that cartoon. So Roadrunners and coyotes are animals that do live in a desert environment, but a Roadrunner or a coyote is pretty opportunistic, and they can live in a lot of different environments. Sometimes they live more in forested areas. The Roadrunner actually will eat rattlesnakes and insects and even scorpions. Ooh. Now, scorpions are an insect adapted to the desert, and they glow green underneath UV light. And part of the reason that they glow such a bright green color is because they have poor eyesight, and they really only want to come out at night. So they want to be sure that they come out when they're less likely to be encountering birds and other things that might eat them, so that then they can go around and eat insects. That's what they eat.
I mean, they're downright scary looking. Would you die if you got stung by a scorpion?
Most of them, no. The desert hairy scorpion that is native to where we live in Nevada, its sting is similar to a bee sting. So you would be at risk if you were allergic, but you couldn't develop an allergic response unless you'd been stung at least once. So the first sting would not be dangerous. It would be similar to just a bee sting.
Bee stings aren't so bad.
No.
Not that I'm volunteering or anything, but yeah, that does sound a lot more reasonable.
All right, let's now switch and talk a little bit about the poles. So we have the Arctic and the Antarctic. Which one is on the top of the planet or the North Pole, and which one is the South?
Well, Antarctica is at the South Pole, so it's got to be the Antarctic, right?
Antarctic is the South.
Yeah.
Yep. And the Arctic is the North. And the North Pole and the South Pole are very different. In our last class, or maybe 2 classes ago, we showed you a graph of temperatures where you could see that the warmest temperature at the North Pole was the same as the coldest temperature at the North Pole. No, did I say it backwards?
The averages, yes. So summer at the South Pole, when it's at its warmest, would actually be about the same temperature as the winter at the North Pole.
Yes, Antarctica,
really surprising.
The South Pole is so much colder than the North Pole.
They're the same distance from the equator, so the factors of light should be the same because they're not getting direct sunlight, right?
They're not getting direct sunlight. They only get indirect sunlight, and
so it's always coming in at an angle, and it's a pretty good angle too. There will always be a shadow when you're in those polar regions. Yeah.
Always. The big difference is elevation. The elevation of the North Pole is about 6 feet or 2 meters-ish, because you're just on top of frozen ice on top of the ocean.
Oh, that's really thin. Nice.
And those of you watching live, I would love if you would put in a guess in the chat about what you think the elevation is of the South Pole. And if you're watching the recording, just say it out loud, take a guess. Don't look it up online, take a guess first. What do you think the elevation is of the South Pole? So we told you the North Pole is about 6 feet above sea level. How many feet above sea level is the South Pole?
And you say the elevation makes a difference, but also if there's a continent there, I mean, you don't have the oceans to regulate the temperatures. I bet that makes some difference as well, right?
It does. So how much, how close you are to the water versus land, that makes a difference. Maurice says 44.
500
Kara
feet.
says 20. Tracy says 7,000 feet. These are good guesses. The answer is 9,300 feet above sea level. That's more than 3,000 meters.
That is high.
That is really high. So Antarctica is not just a bunch of ice over the water. Antarctica is a continent that has huge mountain ranges, active volcanoes, and is enormous. The transatlantic mountains that run across Antarctica are one of the biggest mountain ranges in the world. And the South Pole itself is it's more than a mile above sea level. Yeah. 9,300 meters. It's almost 2 miles.
Yeah, that's approaching 2 miles. That's really high.
And that is one of the main reasons why the South Pole is so cold. You have this combination of really high elevation and then being isolated by ocean from the rest of the world and the swirling vortex of cold water and wind that goes around the continent.
Kate points out that's over 3,000 meters too.
Yes,
that's
very high.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not like the Mount Everest high, but that's just high enough that you're really going to be feeling the effects. And we've seen that temperatures drop the higher you go. So you've got indirect sunlight and it's at a high elevation, and all together.
And that combination makes
a recipe for cold.
Really cold. But even in that cold, hostile environment, we have life. We have some really fascinating life. To start out with, I'd want to mention the McMurdo Valleys. Antarctica is not completely covered in ice and snow. There are dry valleys where it's estimated that it hasn't snowed in more than 1 million years.
Is that hyperbole, or you're really saying 1 million?
No, I'm saying for real. For real, scientists have tried to estimate, okay, how long has it been since it snowed here? And probably it has been more than 1 million years. The way that the wind currents come down these valleys and how low the humidity is all the time, the conditions for snow just don't happen.
Oh, man.
So these valleys in Antarctica actually don't have snow. They have some hyper saline lakes that are super, super salty, which we'll talk about more when we get to hydrology. The most famous animal that lives in Antarctica is definitely the penguin. Here's a picture of a macaroni penguin, one of my favorite penguins. There are many species of these birds that are adapted to swim in the water, and then they nest on top of the ice, which is remarkable.
If I dye my eyebrows blonde like that, would you like it, Science Mom?
Please don't dye your eyebrows, Math Dad. That's a bad idea.
But they thought it was cute.
Another incredible animal that lives in Antarctica is the ice fish. The ice fish is one of the only animals we know of that does not have red blood cells or hemoglobin.
Wait. It doesn't have blood cells?
Its blood is completely clear. It really just has plasma Like when someone donates plasma, they're just donating the liquid.
Uh-huh.
That's what this ice fish has, and oxygen just diffuses through its skin. It's a small little fish that only lives in Antarctic waters, and it does not have blood cells.
Okay, that's kind of crazy.
It's an adaptation that is only possible because of the cold temperatures. There are some really unique animals that live in these really cold waters, and one of the most famous is krill.
Ooh, I know about krill. That's what whales eat, right?
This is one of the main foods that whales eat, and krill are the most abundant single species on our planet. So if you just look at number of individuals for a single species, there are more krill than there are anything else.
Is that true for like ants even?
Even if you combine all of the species of ants, there would be more ants than krill.
Okay.
But if you're looking at a single species of ants, there are going to be more krill.
Oh, wow.
There are estimated to be more than 400 trillion krill, which gives them the biggest biomass of any animal on Earth.
Oh, how big is that? Is it like the size of my finger or is it tiny?
Krill can get to be about 2.5 inches long-ish or so. So I mean, they can get to be about shrimp size. And in fact, some people eat krill. They are considered a delicacy in certain cultures. They're very salty. Sometimes they're made into a paste, but they're super popular with all of the Arctic animals. The entire Arctic food chain is based on eating krill.
Arctic or
Antarctic.
Okay.
Antarctic. Thank you, Math Dad.
Now, okay, so while we're on that topic, how does one pronounce it? So I think we do the lazy American Arctic, Antarctic, but there is an extra C in there.
There is a
Arctic,
C.
Antarctic. We probably should be saying that C in there, just in case you're wondering.
I'll try to say Arctic just for you, Math Dad, from now on.
All right.
One more animal that I wanted to share, 2 more animals. This is an elephant seal, one of my favorite seals, and one that only lives in Antarctica.
Is that like a walrus?
It is, well, back real quick, it is like a walrus, but it does not have any tusks, does not grow tusks like a walrus does. And then last but not least, we have the blue whale. The blue whale is an incredible animal, and not only is it the largest animal alive today, it is the largest animal that has ever lived on our planet.
What about the dinosaurs?
This is bigger than any of the biggest dinosaurs.
Whoa.
Its heart is so large that a person could swim through the blood vessel going into the heart and swim through one of the chambers and swim out. Its heart is about the size of a car. It's enormous. It's hard to really appreciate just the scale of this majestic animal. And it's only possible for an animal to get this big in water. On land, the weight would be too heavy for it to support itself.
That is crazy. I just hadn't thought of that.
Yeah. Nate asks, is it bigger than the megalodon? Yes, a lot bigger than the megalodon. Now let's do our item pool questions. I will run and get Science Puppy, and I know we've had some outstanding questions coming in that our moderators have gathered. I'll grab Science Puppy real quick. We've got some questions for you, and then we will answer some of your questions.
All right. It's going to take me a moment to pull up.
Sorry, Math Dad. I thought we were ready.
I thought I was.
You thought you were ready too?
Closer to being ready. Oh, I know it.
Quick question from Anais while we're getting item pool up. Can cacti give water? So there are certain cacti in the desert where if you were, let's say you were lost in the desert and you needed water, you could cut open a barrel cacti and there would be water inside and you could kind of squeeze out that pulp and drink it. But several barrel cacti, they actually have some toxins inside to discourage exactly that type of behavior. They don't want someone to come and slice them in half and drink all their water. So some barrel cacti are poisonous. So I would definitely not recommend trying that unless you knew your plant identification.
Oh, wow.
All right.
Okay.
I'll go grab the puppy.
So let's start off. Go to itempool.com/sciencemom/live. And you can click on the link down below if you're watching the replay and to try these poll questions as well. First question. What fraction of the Earth's land is dry? So that means it's losing more water through evaporation than it gains by precipitation. So this did get mentioned today, but just once in passing. And we did look at that map that showed what portion of the Earth was deserts, but then what was the portion that is classified as dry land, which included the deserts as well as other arid regions approaching deserts. If 5 possible votes here. Is it a 6th, a 5th, a 4th, a 3rd, a half? One category is getting more votes than the others.
And a 3rd is correct. Woohoo!
They were listening. They were paying attention.
And that is a lot of land area that is arid and dry.
Yep. All right. How much rain does Death Valley, California receive each year on average? I don't know if we said this.
I'll
one
be
out
impressed.
loud.
I think I mentioned it, but I mentioned it kind of quickly.
Ooh. So is it no rain? Is it 5 centimeters, 10
About 2
centimeters,
inches.
20 centimeters, 50 centimeters? Ooh. So yeah, Death Valley, we know it's dry, but how dry? And I thought it was interesting when you said that it might get all of its rain in just a couple storms.
Sometimes it will. Sometimes it'll get a big storm. And
That's a really big storm to get an inch or two all at once, right?
are you giving hints this time, Math Dad?
Yeah. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Yeah,
And
they
2
knew it.
inches of rain is correct. That is all the rain that Death Valley gets. We live not too far from Death Valley near Las Vegas. We get about 4 inches of rain a year. And you can tell a big difference looking at the plants that grow around Las Vegas versus in Death Valley. There are a lot more creosote bushes around here.
Ooh, okay. Which pole is in the Arctic? Is it the North Pole, the South Pole, or the East Pole? All right. And I fully expect them to get this one right. But I don't know.
Definitely. It's a good one to review and good thing
Okay,
to know.
yeah, maybe this one wasn't as clear because I am seeing votes for multiple categories here. I think they'll get it right, but not by as much as I had thought, Science Mom. All right, well, the pole in the Arctic is the North Pole.
Good job. North Pole, Arctic, South Pole, Antarctic.
That's right. Question 4. True or false, polar climates never receive direct sunlight. And so by direct sunlight, we're talking about the sun overhead.
Correct.
So indirect would mean coming from the side.
Coming from the side. Yep.
All right, so it's a good question. Watching the votes come in. Get me in the head. Oh, there we go. It's better. I don't think I've stumped him this time, Science Mom.
I don't think so.
All right. And this is true.
True.
So in the polar regions, there will always be a shadow. And in fact, once you get above the tropics, so Hawaii is the only United States state that is going to have this where they might have no shadow at all. The sun can be directly overhead at some point during the day, but
I remember trying this when I was a kid. I would go out at noon and I was confused because I thought at noon there should be no shadow, but there was always a shadow. And it was because I grew up in Utah and I was too far north of the equator.
That's right. There will always be at least some
Always
shadow.
be some shadow. But the shadow will be the shortest at noon.
So I might think that the sun doesn't get far enough north, but really the Earth doesn't point the north end enough towards the sun.
And good question from Ben about Antarctica. Is the high elevation, why it's so cold? That is one of the main reasons. Because think about Mount Everest is colder. As you go up higher, you get colder temperatures.
Pretty much all mountains, that works, right?
That does. And Antarctica as a whole is a continent with a pretty high elevation.
Okay, last question here. What is the driest continent in the world?
Is it Antarctica, Australia, Asia, or Africa? If you were to look at these 5 continents that each start with an A, which one is the driest?
Mm-hmm. And definitely some dry places. We saw that desert map you showed us at the beginning.
That's right. So Africa has the Sahara Desert, and then Australia has a lot of deserts. Remember that map, that big red area? Most of Australia was desert.
Asia's got a share of deserts.
As Asia
Antarctica,
has the Gobi Desert.
Said was a desert, man.
And the answer is Antarctica. Good job, you guys.
Nicely done. Yeah, there weren't any that were even close today. They crushed it. So, well done.
So for a super fast little victory dance for the science kids, Math Dags, they're unbeatable. Disco and dab. We had several requests.
Disco and dab?
Disco and dab.
That was my victory dance.
Bum,
Okay.
bum, bum,
All right.
bum, bum.
All right. Here goes.
Disco and dab. Make sure you don't hit me in the head. Good job. I'm going to answer 3 questions real quick that came in that our moderators gathered. Real good questions. So one is, what is the largest desert lizard? The largest lizard is the Komodo dragon. And does it live in a desert climate? I would have to do a little bit of research. I think
so.
It's
I've
more
only
of a
seen them
savanna.
in jungly.
Yeah, I think it lives in more of a savanna climate. But chacualas are a real big desert that live here. And then in the Galapagos Islands, which have very dry areas in that climate as well, you get big iguanas that actually are somewhat aquatic and go in water. So there are a lot of really interesting lizards that have good adaptations for a dry climate.
Yeah, but we're not sure of the exact answer.
I have to look that up.
Let us know if you know better.
Why does rain drop salt? From Patrick. This is a great question. So back to that image that we showed from Death Valley, where you saw these salt flats that collect down in Badwater Basin, the salt is actually coming from rocks. And it's coming from rocks over hundreds of miles and over a very long period of time. So if you were to take a pure glass of water and put a bunch of rocks in it and shake it all around, then you would have dirty water, right? And that water would have really small amounts of salt and other minerals in it. And if that water all comes down to a huge valley and then evaporates, it takes thousands of years for all of that salt to develop, but you will get a big salt flat if it's a very arid climate. Good question.
And that's just the way crystals would form in general at any time that you had them dissolved in something and then evaporated the water.
Yes. And then our last question, really great one from Aeroskies. Can Antarctica have volcanoes? Because we did mention that it's a continent that has volcanoes, and somewhere that's really cold have volcanoes? And the answer is absolutely.
Oh.
Antarctica has a volcano that has a lava lake. There are only 5 lava lakes in the world. One of them is in Antarctica.
Wait, like with an open top and lava that you look down and you see it?
A lake of lava, yes. And there are several active volcanoes on Antarctica that are underneath glaciers. And they were only recently discovered because their eruptions occur underneath a mile of ice.
So the lava is not even getting to the surface above the ice.
No, but it's melting the ice. And with modern technology, they were able to see and measure, oh, there was a volcanic eruption that just took place here underneath all that ice. So you can absolutely have volcanoes on Antarctica and even under ice.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Thank you so much for joining us, you guys, today. And we want to end with a very special happy birthday shout out to Noah from California, who is turning 11 today. Happy birthday, Noah. We hope you have a wonderful birthday, and thank you all for joining us live. And thank you to you if you're watching our recording. We will see you again on Friday with an art project. We're doing our second art project this Friday.
So do they need to get any supplies ready for that, Science Mom?
If you want to use our templates, print out the templates that you'll find at the end of the notes. But really, if you just have paper and then coloring supplies, you'll be all set. Some tape.
Scissors and tape?
Scissors and tape will be helpful as well.
All right, so
glue.
So give that supply list a little look if you want to do it along with us.
Work hard, grow smart, and we'll see you on Friday.